It's that ticket into a world where people who have not even been born in countries, societies, and cultures that have not even begun to think about know who you are. Those people will sing songs of your attributes and achievements in languages that have not even been invented yet. And that's no exaggeration. There are very, very few modern day sports people who do not know the original tale of Marathon and the runner who collapsed after bringing the good news of the Athenian victory over the ancient Persian army. We know the names of some of the great gladiators and chariot racers in the ancient Colosseum of Imperial Rome. They carved out their immortality when the existence of our language, the words that we're communicating with today, English, was not even dreamed about for another 1,000 years. And it's an important concept to grasp because it's the motivation at the center of a criminal regime of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse of many modern day top level athletes that we're going to discuss in this episode of Crime Waves. It's the reason why so many of our very best put up with such appalling treatment. We're going to discuss this theme with a 3-time Olympic gold medalist, a person who's dedicated her life to ensuring athletes are free from this form of criminal abuse. But be warned, it's a shocking tale. But if you're interested in sports, particularly if you're an athlete or a parent of an athlete, you need to know about this issue. Welcome to Crime Waves. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Crime Waves. My name is Declan Hill, and along with my producers each week, and this week it's Eric Krebs, we explore issues of corruption, organized crime, and forensic science. And we do so by bringing you the primary voices, the people who are at the very center of an issue, investigation, or criminal case. And this week, we're honored to have Nancy Hogshead Maker, the winner of the 2019 International Play the Game Award, and is the person who best represents the true values of sport. She's an Olympic athlete, a gold medal winner, and someone who has spent decades fighting to make sure all athletes, male and female, are free from abuse. Good morning, Nancy. Thank you so much for joining us on Crime Waves.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
Look, let's just get cracking straight away. There is a quote that you're famous for. Every year when I'm teaching my students, I mention it, and it blows their mind. Your quote is, "All coaches are not pedophiles, but every pedophile wants to be a coach." Now, what do you mean by that?
First of all, again, thank you so much for having me on and introducing me to your tribe of people here.
It's an honor for us.
Yeah. So what I mean by that is our Olympic system, meaning sports that are not associated with schools, have very little oversight. And I should say, in past tense, had very little oversight, meaning that a pedophile had lots of access to kids. They were not in situations where there was insurance or certification, or there was no general counsel position, no president of a university, nobody sort of on top of them or over them that was overseeing what it was that they were doing. And the official position of the United States Olympic Committee and the national governing bodies, meaning United States Swimming, United States Gymnastics, Taekwondo, skiing, etc., right? All the 50 different national governing bodies, their position was, we don't do anything about pedophiles. We let the police do that. We let the parents do that. We let the clubs do that. So now, even if we know of a molester out there, we're as an official position, we're not going to do anything about it.
Draw the difference for me between that bizarre position and a school board or a church or another position of responsibility for an adult over children. What just draw that out for me and the
Sure,
listeners.
sure. Well, so schools, in order to be in a school, you have to have a background check. You have to be, if you want to teach, you've got to be certified. You have a license, and if you do something wrong, like have sex with your student, you will lose your certification and not be able to teach again anywhere else in the country.
But doesn't that happen to a coach? I mean, if
No,
a coach, sorry,
no,
what?
no. For coaches, particularly in the Olympic movement, they can walk off the street and go and be a coach. They have to have, there's no certification. There's no background. You have to have certification to be a hairdresser, to groom dogs. You might hear some COVID puppies back here behind me. But no, you have to have certification for all kinds of things, not to be a coach in the Olympic movement. And in fact, it was a real battle for us just to get basic background checks, meaning police background checks. And remember, police only catch a teeny tiny number of pedophiles that are out there. The police are actually not very good at addressing sexual abuse of children. But even that, like even charging $35 per coach was seen as too high a barrier, too much to spend to protect kids from abuse. I mean, right? So, that's as basic a level as you get.
No, this is important because, and let me ask you another basic question. I kind of think I know the answer. Probably most of my listeners do, but let's ask this very basic question.
Yeah.
Are there a bunch of pedophiles coaching sports now?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So so I started working on this in 2010. In 2017, finally, we got the United States Center for Safe Sports started. Since then, there have been over 4,000 reports of sexual abuse. In my sport of swimming alone, there have been over 250 coaches that have been banned. When you figure they probably have, between like 5 and 15 victims each. So yes, your risk of harm. Most parents have no idea that when their kid is in school sports, how protected they are. There's insurance, and the insurance carrier makes sure that that the school is adhering to certain guidelines because they don't want to pay money. 2 is there's federal statutes that tell schools you have the responsibility to protect your students and your athletes from both pedophiles and otherwise, and they have assets. So they want to protect their assets, and so they have all these layers on top of the coach to make sure that that bad things are not happening, and if something does happen, to make sure that they are not likely to get rehired. None of that exists in the club movement. There was 10 years ago no insurance. Usually the clubs didn't own their own facilities, so there's no asset to go after. So civil law, like as a mechanism to make sports safer, really didn't exist.
So essentially what you're saying, Nancy, is that if you're a parent and you're listening to this and you're bringing your child to a club, be it a baseball thing or hockey or gymnastics or whatever,
right,
you are taking a roll of a dice, because there's very little compared to the school or compared to a church or compared to the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts or whatever. There's very little infrastructure that is set up to protect the safety of your child.
Correct. As particularly 10 years ago, there was not only was there no oversight, but that no oversight was intentional. That as we've been working to try to get these different layers, background checks,
yes.
Insurance,
or a hotline for an athlete or something like that. Yes.
Right. Yeah. There's
the basics.
Numerous statutes.
The basics.
Yeah. Basic. What every child-serving organization should do. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Has been a real battle, struggle, difficult. Not like what you would think of as like a duh. I'll give you an example of something that just happened. This happened yesterday.
Right.
So my coach from the 1984 Olympics is on the banned list for molesting my teammate at the time, Suzette Moran.
Okay.
Mitch Ivey, he's lit. You can Google him and find out, right? He molested numerous young kids that he was training that were his athletes. And 2 of his ex-wives committed suicide. Me and my teammates, we like to describe him as this guy leaves like a wake of emotional upset behind him. And so I get a thing from the Olympians Association that's saying, hey, here are all the swimmers that live in the state of Florida and you guys connect. And I'll be damned if Mitch Ivey was not on that list. So I said, he was banned back in 2013. And the Alumni Association says, we've never removed anybody. Well, maybe we should have this big omnibus bill and look at DWIs and look at blah, blah, blah. It's like, this is a no-brainer. You're either going to have the pedophile feel comfortable being in the Olympic movement, or you're going to have the victim feel comfortable being in the Olympic movement. It's a zero-sum game. Pick a side. Because
I don't understand this, and I think most of our listeners are not going to why. This is really a duh moment.
A duh moment.
Why would you, if you're running a sports, if you're the American, Olympic Committee, why wouldn't you put this stuff in? This is so basic.
Oh, Declan, here we go. Ready? Okay, everybody's going to get a first-year law little mini exercise. I'll do this as quickly as I can. All right, it's all about avoiding civil liability, and it's about avoiding the responsibility that comes with civil liability, right? So,
but this is basic. This is like put a whistleblower hotline in, and do background checks on, just require background checks. Why wouldn't this be?
Why? Okay, I'm about to tell you. Ready? All right.
Yeah, you're sending, just for the people not watching this,
right.
Nancy, you're waving your arms at me because you're just like this seems so basic and I'm struggling.
Yeah.
Please.
It's all about do-re-mi money. So, Declan, I've known you now for several years. I've known your work dealing with what you're trying to do to be able to get gambling money, to be able to deal with the ethics of sports. Okay,
we'll get to that in a second.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. So I know you. You and I are going to go outside right here. We're going to go across the street. And I know that it's uniquely dangerous out there. And I know that you don't know that it's uniquely dangerous out there. There's something about this intersection that is
right.
Okay. If we're going across this intersection, I know you, and you end up getting hurt, you can't sue me because I don't owe you a legal duty. Okay? So no duty of care.
Right.
Okay. The minute I start telling you, Declan, guess what? This intersection is dangerous. You better be careful.
Right.
Okay? And then you get hurt and I don't do it well. Then you can sue me because I have now assumed a duty of care for you. So,
but
Nancy,
hang on. I get that point. So do all our listeners. But I'm not a 9-year-old gymnast. I'm not a little kid. How can there not be a duty of care to a child in sports?
Because they affirmatively chose this legal strategy to save themselves money. So that right now in court.
And who is they, by the way?
The United States Olympic Committee, United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee.
Wow.
And all the sport governing bodies right now in court, USA Gymnastics, the United States Olympic Committee are arguing that they don't owe a duty of care for the Nassar victims, that it's not their job. That it's called his criminal behavior broke the chain of proximate causation. We don't need to get into a big torts lecture here, but that was an intentional strategy in order to save money for the back pocket of the administrator.
I'm clutching my head at this moment, and let's just take a step back, because there are some people who may not know, they're listening to us from around the world, who may not know the Larry Nassar case. And the Larry Nassar, just a quick explanation, is the doctor for the national team, the United States national team of gymnastics, the ladies and guys that went off to the Olympics and the World Championship, and he systematically abused hundreds of girls over decades.
Correct.
He's now in jail. He's been convicted. He's now been things. And I'm shaking my head as you and I, Nancy, are having this conversation, that anybody would not be saying, well, we really screwed that one up. How do we make sure that never happens again?
Oh, no, the whole gymnastics community is very much, if go on Twitter, and there's it's called Gymnastics United right now. It's a hashtag. But so no, the whole gymnastics community was like, look, we got Larry Nassar out of gymnastics. Let's continue on as though everything else is fine. They thought like the problem was this one guy, rather than a system that doesn't allow athletes to be able to complain. Okay, so step one is, why did the sports system do that? But step two is, what makes sports so dangerous is that both the sports culture and the sports governance system are set up so that the athlete is literally powerless. They are beholden to the national governing body and their coaches to be able to make the team. If they're not obedient and compliant, they do not make the Olympic team.
Wow. I'm still struggling with the concept of somebody saying Gymnasts United. United about what? I mean, you've had at the highest level of a sport a tolerance of systemic sexual abuse, and you're united? Like, it boggles my mind.
No,
Look,
and maybe
yes,
I can say that right. Yeah, no. Gymnastics United is about the gymnasts coming together and saying this is a very sick system.
Oh, good. Okay, I get it. Thank you for clarifying that.
So, yeah, right. So to say, like, look, the issue is not just one person, Larry Nassar, or one rogue, unique coach, or like my coach, one Mitch Ivy. That's not it. It is instead, when I talk about every pedophile wants to be a coach, it is a whole system that doesn't allow athletes to have. It's not just sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is one symptom of athletes having no power. So they have no money. Allie Reisman's mother said that for the most of her career, she got $500 a month, while Steve Penny is getting $600K a year. So she's getting 500, right?
Sorry, who is Allie Reisman?
Allie Reisman is the Olympic gold medalist for both 2012 and 2016 gymnasts. She's phenomenal. Okay. She just obliterated the Olympic Committee when she gave her Nassar statement saying, you were ready to take credit for all of my accomplishments, but when I needed your help, did you come help me? No, you were not there. Were you there when all the gymnasts were there in the courtroom and were making their statements? Was anybody there from the Olympic Committee? Was anybody there from USA Gymnastics? No. So no, Allie Reisman is boss. She has great energy, and she didn't need empowerment when we think of empowerment as like having courage. What she needed was power. What she needed was the ability to be able to speak up without losing her place on the team. Without if athletes have to be obedient.
I'm sorry, let me jump into this. There's a second group stage here, because I really want to address this issue, the systemic power of athletes, because I think many of our listeners, and myself before I got into exposing match fixing and organized crime in sport, I had the perception that athletes were good looking, in general, powerful young people with tremendous amounts of glamour. They were living a kind of literally an Olympian, demigod-like lifestyle. Please speak to my previous unknowing self. What is the life of an average athlete like?
The life of an average athlete is poor, right on the brink of getting injured or sick. As soon as they got sick, injured, or pregnant, they lost their health insurance. If you're not covering sickness, injury, or pregnancy, what are you covering, right, with the Olympic Committee? Well, if you try to complain about we had one athlete who complained and said to another person, an employee of their national governing body, "You're incompetent." And this athlete was on the board, and they put up flyers all around saying that this guy was dangerous, that he didn't make other people feel safe, and they kicked him off the board because he's told an employee that they were incompetent. So what is the life of an average athlete like? Other than, I mean, right, so you take the basic concept, no power, and then go from there. I mean, they have very little autonomy. Katie Ulander, she's written well. She's a 4-time amazing Olympian. She's a sledder, winter athlete. And so here she is making almost no money. I mean, she's, oh my, poor thing. And she doesn't come from money. And if she brings her cell phone to dinner, she's fined $250. So it's that kind of infantilizing that gets done to athletes. Like so here, let me put it in stark relief. Okay, who's the GOAT of all time? Michael Phelps. Okay, the #1 Olympian of all time. When Michael Phelps got in trouble for drunk driving, the whole Olympic world came crashing down on him. There was no punishment that was too much. They crushed the guy. They, every way that he could have been humiliated and suspended, they did. Okay? All right, let's take that comparison with the people that work for the Olympic Committee. And so Scott Blackman, who we know knew about Larry Nassar and who deleted the email, did not help the girls whatsoever, did not tell Michigan State, where Larry Nassar continued to work. He abused at least 50 more girls. And he gets a $2.4 million severance package when he leaves. Same with Steve Penny, used to be head of USA Gymnastics. He knew all about it. He actively covered it up. Those of you who have seen Athlete A, if you've not seen Athlete A, I'm actually an expert in the case. I knew every fact going into it.
And Athlete A is that currently it's a Netflix TV series that I recommend strongly. If you're interested in this, we'll have information on our website on the podcast about this. Yeah. Nancy, I want to interject here and underline something, because you're so habituated to this that I think I want to kind of pull out the strings here, because I asked you about the life of the average athlete. And you're talking about how little power and that kind of precariousness they have. But you mentioned some of the top athletes in the world. Like Michael Phelps and gold medal winners are, I mean, if they're in trouble, you know, what does it speak to the average NCAA athlete in field hockey or this or that, who, if they say the wrong thing or they wear the wrong dress or they don't wear a suit or whatever, can get pushed off the team, they can lose their scholarship, they can lose all kinds of stuff, and they're really in precariousness.
Yeah, I think most athletes think that Michael Phelps would get treated like a god, right? So the Olympic Committee says how could you complain, Michael Phelps? You had a double bedroom in the hall of
Olympic Village.
The Olympic Village, thank you.
Yeah.
You had a double. You had more than. Do you know what kind of hotel accommodations that the Olympic Committee gives itself? I mean, nowhere near. I mean, basically, he got a double in a dorm room. Okay, a dorm room. They are literally staying in 5-star hotels, drinking the nicest champagne and eating literally caviar. I mean, for them to. Okay, so Michael Phelps also has a phenomenal documentary out. In addition to Athlete A, which I really recommend, please go see The Weight of Gold, that talks about the mental health issues that athletes have. Okay.
Yes.
And Michael
Both
Phelps
of
talks
those
about,
links, by the way, will be on our webpage of the podcast, because you're absolutely right, Nancy. That mental health of the top athletes is extraordinary.
but wait, let me just wrap this
Please,
up.
please.
That people think that the very elite. The reason why it's tough for me is because they have their reasons. I'm not good enough, or I'm not respected enough. They have some reason as to why it's hard for them in particular. And when the athletes come together, what they grasp is that it's hard, and all of them are powerless. That this powerlessness is a feature of the system. It's not a bug. It's not a one-off. It is a feature of the system. And that in order to fix sexual abuse, you have to also fix financial abuse, and you have to fix basic athlete autonomy, to treat these people as though that they are who they are, which is, I don't know about you, but I watched the Olympics and I am just practically moved to tears. This is the best of what humanity has to offer.
Yes.
They're all doing something they've got their 10,000 hours in, and it
Yep.
is ballet. It is gorgeous. It is competence. It is beauty personified.
It's the human spirit. It really is.
Oh,
I often am moved to tears, not by the winners, but
uh-huh.
by something that happens. Somebody falls and one of the other athletes takes that moment to help up a competitor. Or I still remember the Japanese marathon
Yeah.
female runner who was running with a broken leg, and she just wouldn't give up. And she found, things. Look, I just want to jump in because
Sure.
you're so charismatic that we can get swept away. And I'm a newly arrived immigrant in America. I'm a Canadian, and I want to stress that what we're speaking about today isn't particular to America. One of the strengths of my new country is that you guys talk about it. You said, this is a problem. I'm going to drop my gloves, as we say in Canada, and I'm going to fight. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to do this. But the same thing happens in many other countries around the world, where many of our listeners will be listening about. A couple of weeks ago, you and I were corresponding about a Human Rights Watch report. Again, it's going to be on our podcast website, about Japanese and Korean athletes, Japanese being particularly important because of the Tokyo Olympics coming up. Please tell us a little bit about that and the conditions that those researchers found in Japan.
Sure. Well, sparked by a couple of suicides.
Yes.
The Human Rights Watch and my friend Minky Wharton went into Japan and did numerous interviews, and found that the physical abuse, meaning beating athletes, taking baseball bats, sticks to them, slapping them, yeah,
baseball bat,
hitting them hard
with a baseball bat,
was a functional part of sport, right? In other words, everybody, it was as accepted for them as what I think, like the way that we weigh in young girls in particular in sport, and how damaging that is. Like we all, like I've kind of got to, I'm going to have to spend a couple of minutes kind of explaining to you why that's so damaging, as opposed to hitting people. You really don't have to explain why that's damaging.
With a baseball bat. Like when you say it's a functional part of sport, I'm like, it does not sound in any way like a functional. And it drove some of these beautiful young people who are just trying to do their best. We're really putting on the line. It put, they committed suicide. I strongly recommend Minky's work. She's a fantastic person. I want to share with you a story because the Michael Phelps story reminded me of this. And then I want to talk about your incredible work before U.S. Congress. But let me just share this one story. It's about the sport that I'm passionate about, which is international soccer. And it's about one of the great teams from Africa, Nigeria, whose players are really, really good. And they turned up at one of the World Cups. And the World Cup is the world's biggest sports tournament. It even dwarfs the Olympics. It's like the Olympics meets the Super Bowl, and then you got to times it by 10. The Nigerian government officials normally when you have a soccer team going to one of these tournaments, there's like 15, 20 masseuses, coaches, cooks, managers, whatever things. They had 157 of them. In fact, they had so many that they stayed at this 5-star hotel and they realized they didn't have enough room. So what they did was they kicked the players out, and they kept the 5-star hotel for the government officials and their girlfriends and wives or whatever. And they booked in the players into a 2-star, 3-star hotel down the road beside a highway. That's the way. And I wish I could say that was an exceptional and it was just Nigeria, but
Right.
those kind of things happen constantly in the sports world.
Right. What makes athletes so susceptible to abuse is that they, as a youngster, you can get this experience of flow, you can get this experience of mastery that you can't get in other areas, right? It takes a long time to be a master of, say, mathematics or literature or other areas. Pretty young kids can get this sense of physical empowerment, and it feels so good. What makes kids be so susceptible to abuse is that what's being held out is immortality. That people are going to be talking about their exploits for time immemorial, right? So just like you were talking about the Japanese athlete who broke her leg, right? So we're talking about we're going to be talking about Michael Phelps forever. We're going to be talking about Allie Reisman forever. And
we talk about Jesse Owens, and we talk about the guys in Chariots of Fire forever, and we talk about, Dempsey, the great boxing champion. You're absolutely, it is the ticket to immortality.
Ticket to immortality, right? I remember being a youngster and going to Los Angeles, and they had this huge wall of that was marble, and all the Olympic gold medalists had their names chiseled into the wall, and I wanted to be on that wall. So I know the hunger that comes with sort of having immortality dangled in front of you. And
we're going to get into your personal background, because people, if you don't know Nancy's background, it's extraordinary. Yeah. But before I do that, I want to talk about something that you've done right now, as opposed to those Olympic gold medals that you won.
Sure.
You've done something almost unique. It's 2020. It's an election year here in America. The whole country is divided between whether you like Trump, you hate Trump, you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, you're this kind of Democrat, you're that kind of Democrat, whatever. As of a few days ago, in front of the U.S. Senate, you and Senator Richard Blumenthal here of Connecticut got a bill passed unanimously. Do your happy dance, please. You're doing that now. And tell us about that bill and what it meant and how you were able to get all those different politicians together to agree.
Well, if I can toot my own horn, this is actually the second time that we've done this. We got the Protecting Young Children from Sexual Abuse and Safe Sport Authorization Act passed, signed by President Trump back in 2018. This is an extension of that. This is recognizing that you can't just have this layer of protection, which we did. We gave in 2018, everybody in the Olympic movement has a legal duty to protect athletes from physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. Yay! So, and the bill does a number of other things. It creates the U.S. Center for Safe Sport, and they are they're not exactly a licensing agency. They're more like a business's HR firm that kicks out people who are behaving badly.
Yes.
So, right. So, and that's where you get all the complaints and whatnot. So they created this entity, kind of like the United States Center for kind of like a United States Anti-Doping Agency that does the work that the Olympic Committee was uniquely bad at getting dopers out of sport. They are uniquely bad at getting sexual abusers out of sport, getting coaches, one of their own, somebody within their own ecosystem out. So we got that created. What this new bill does is it rejiggers the power dynamic between athletes and the organization. So rather than athletes only having 20% of all committees and board members, they will now have a third. And it makes the U.S. Center for Safe Sport financially independent from the USOPC. the USOPC, the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, has to give them at least $20 million a year.
Yes.
Right now, they're paying them, I don't know, I think it's like $5 or $6 million a year, which, given that they're covering 16 million athletes.
And they've got at least 4,000, as you were saying earlier in our interview, 4,000 active cases of potential sexual abuse across America, and you don't have all that many investigators. You needed
Correct.
that budget.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. So it does that. It does a number of things, but one of the main things that it does, Declan, that I hope you'll be helpful with as we move forward, is it creates a 16-person commission that will be tasked with rewriting the Sports Act. The Sports Act is a statute. I've been teaching sports law now for 20 years, and almost none of my students, I would say fewer than 5, even knew that there was this thing called the Ted Stevens Olympic and Amateur Sports Act, right? That there was something that governed the Olympic movement that was separate from, say, the NCAA is not governed by a statute. That was good for 1978, back in the world of amateurism, back in the world when there was not hundreds of millions of dollars in sponsorship and media money available. It was good for back then, and we need to update it. So that 16-person commission will be meeting for 270 days, and it is in that work that when the statute gets passed, that we're hoping for the kind of reforms that will uniquely give athletes more autonomy, so that when that next dollar comes into the Olympic movement, athletes are part of deciding, where does it go? Does it go to health insurance? Does it go to a
whistleblower hotline?
A hotline. Does it go to mental health, like Michael Phelps wants? Does it go to facilities, right? So where does it go? Or does it go into the back pocket of the administrators who are making 7 figures?
But at this moment, you and Senator Blumenthal were able to get people from all across the spectrum.
Correct.
And again, it's a really beautiful moment. It really speaks to the human spirit that you can have a Trumpian Republican, you have an anti-Trumpian Democrat, whoever, saying, you know what, this is wrong. Let's get this together. Let me ask you this question, Nancy. Sorry, but when you're dealing with the U.S. Congress, when you're dealing with those Congress people, what's the number one piece of advice you would give to the rest of us in terms of dealing with those people on an individual level?
Collaboration. Be a voice of helpfulness. Give them more information, right? We wrote them legal memo after legal memo in order to be helpful. Just as one example, the USOPC was during the Pyeongchang, the Olympics that were in Korea. They were trying to convince everybody that, hey, it's not our job. We can't do anything about it. The Sports Act, you, Congress, haven't given us the power to be able to do anything about Larry Nassar and about USA Gymnastics. And we wrote this 2-page memo, and we had over, 100 Olympians sign on to say that's hogwash. The law absolutely gives you not only the right to be able to regulate the national governing bodies, but also the responsibility, and you're supposed to do it, right? Yes. So again, staffers, they don't know about what the statute requires, and they're not familiar with it, right? So my number one piece of advice is we just kept hammering things like this home, so that the staffers, in particular, the staffers are phenomenal. There's too many for me to call out here, but yes, but the staffers, like, we did this. This is over almost 4 years, where we one by one. Here's an example. I bet nobody here knows that table tennis was sued by 60 of its athletes, trying to say they wanted objective criteria for making the team. So the coach wanted that right. They wanted to decide who made the team. And the athlete said, no, this is a win-loss game. So in swimming, it's first or second Olympic trials. One of the things that you got to see in the documentary Athlete A, again, hope you'll see it, is that they manipulated the system so that athlete A, who's Maggie Nichols, did not make the Olympic team. even though she objectively was one of the top 8 athletes who okay, so it doesn't rise to the level of Congress knowing about pregnancy discrimination, about sex discrimination, about what's going on with the women athletes, the Equal Pay Act claims of the women soccer players. It was, we took it upon ourselves as volunteers, as 100%, how can we be value added to the Olympic movement? This is a unique property that unites the right and left. Everybody can get behind our Olympic team and wants to support our Olympic team. And so we wanted to collaborate. We were not dictatorial. We kept giving them more and more information. We gave press releases, and we got the Olympic movement to be supportive of us. So before us, we call ourselves Team Integrity, the United States, or the Committee to Restore Integrity to the USOPC.
Yes.
And before us, there really was nowhere that somebody who wanted to who wanted to complain or had who knew that there were issues out there. There was no place for them to go. There was no spokesperson. So we have 500 Olympians, Paralympians, and elite athletes, 200 national level coaches. We have 75 of the top sports leaders in the country. If you were in my world of, like, who's in the Olympic world and who are the survivors that are really out there in front making a difference, Rachel Den Hollander and so many others, the army of survivors, right? So we got this huge group to go in and collaborate.
I want to step back now, because you've built an army of survivors. You built hundreds of current athletes. You built hundreds of current sports officials who are genuinely trying to do the right thing.
Right.
Many of them were not, but the people who were attracted to Team Integrity were trying to do the different things. You brought politicians, and again, hats off to them.
Right.
To be a Trump supporter, to be a non-Trump supporter, whatever, to reach across that divide and do that. But that's now. You're at the peak of your career. You've won all kinds of awards. But let me let me go back, because this ain't your first rodeo. And you work for decades alone, trying to bring these issues out. Long before the public knew about all the problems with Team USA and before all these issues and stuff. Tell us a little bit about your background, what gives you the fire to win the Olympic gold medals and all this and do this fight, please.
Well, what gave me the fire to be an Olympian?
And
yeah,
to take that fire and spend the next few decades fighting for athletes.
Yeah, there really is nothing like the experience of being gifted at something. So I kind of got it, and other people could see it. I broke a national age group record when I was 12 years old, and I was ranked #1 in the world when I was 14. So I had these competitive experiences of flow and that is like, you'll keep doing just about anything to kind of get that, right? To go and have it, you just sort of feel this connection with God, and this feeling of like I would feel like my whole body would explode, like my body would be gone. I was only conscious of breathing, and just these transcendent moments.
This is what I was put on this earth by the Almighty to do.
Yeah. So was, really, really lucky. I had phenomenal coaches, particularly in the beginning. Randy Reese, we just raised a bunch of money to get him a pool named after him. So I went to college and I was raped. I was out running. Duke has 2 campuses, East and West. And so this great big guy grabbed me, pulled me into the woods, and for 2.5 hours was raped. I am unusually lucky to be alive. I really, I didn't think I was going to live to get out of there. He made no, up until the very end, he made no, I mean, there was no hope that I was going to get out of there.
Right.
So the hard part for me, believe it or not, was not being raped for 2.5 hours. The hard part was having PTSD afterwards and not knowing who I was and not having control over my own emotions, not being able to sleep. I mean, nobody's good when they can't sleep, but having weird behaviors that I couldn't stop. This was back in 1981. We really didn't know that much about PTSD back then. And I had no role model of somebody saying, you're going to recover. You're going to be just fine. And God, for the grace of God, the most wonderful people at Duke University were supportive of me. And I recognized that but for Sue Loslick and Dean Wilson and my coach, Bob Thompson at the time, that I would not be here, that they busted it for me. They went out of their way to make sure that so they didn't just believe that it happened, right? A lot of
Yes.
people like, oh, they have a hard time getting to sort of stage one. They believed in the depth of my emotional harm. And so because they redshirted me, I got to not compete at all. I kind of got to get a break from swimming. They dropped 2 classes, and I can kind of go on, but they really busted it for me. And as a result, I was able to go win 3 gold medals and 1 silver medal afterwards. What I always tell people, don't tell the stupid story that she got raped and then she went on to go win 3 gold medals, because it wasn't because I'm uniquely strong that I could do that. I was part of a community that loved me and nurtured me and let me be weird and let me recover. So that experience of having a community surround me has informed so much of my life as an attorney and even as an Olympian. I'm going to say one more thing about when I went back to swimming. Not only did it give me the gift of feeling this sense of grace and connection, but also it is a great place to heal. That what everybody says about PTSD is that hard physical labor helps calm the brain down, number 1. Number 2 is there's a therapy technique, I didn't even know it existed, but where if you relive the experience, but this time I would have a machete and I would whack and I would slice and there would be like blood flying everywhere. And I would, right? And so I could under the water while I was working so hard, I could use that anger that I had and that sadness and that emotion to go faster. So I could, at the same time I was healing, I was going faster, right? There was something very divine about the process. So I love sport. And I think it has this unique ability in our world to make kids better. There's abundant research to show that it makes kids smarter. They get more education. They're healthier for the rest of their lives. They and economically, they make 8% more if they have a sports experience than if they don't. So we want to have more of them, and we want to make sure that those experiences are quality experiences. That when we know that something interferes with that, like sexual abuse, we need to eliminate that. We need to get rid of that. So anyway, so that's like, where does the fire come from? Like I recognize how lucky I was to be raped in the way that I was, that I hadn't been drinking, and that my rapist had no power. He was not Bill Cosby or Weinstein or something like that. So back in 1981, right, people really could rush to be able to help me. I think every rape victim and every survivor of assault should get what I got. And if they did, we would be living in a literally different world if we loved people, if we believed that it happened, and in the depth of their emotional harm and gave them the space to be able to recover. If we did that for rape victims. So
the drive to ensure that this doesn't happen to any other athlete, and I really want to thank you both for sharing this, and because there'll be many listeners who are identifying with us, who haven't had your
1 in 4. Yeah,
who
1 in
are
4
saying,
women,
thank
1 in
goodness
1 in
somebody
7
is
men.
saying that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not uncommon at all. Like, it's shocking how common it is.
Yeah, I when I'm talking about these issues in my class on sexual abuse in athletes, it's not unusual for students to come to me afterwards and talk about this, just to be able to create a safe space, as you have done with Safe Sport, to be able to discuss these issues. But
wait, and Declan, I just want to say, if you have students coming and talking to you about their experience afterwards, you're doing it right. If people feel able to be vulnerable around you, that you're a safe person, you're doing it right. Because so many people, there's all this research saying that people don't tell. One of the most hardest parts of parenting was this recognition that every parent thinks their kid would tell them if something happened to them, and the research shows they won't. So
wow.
Yeah, no, if people are coming to you and disclosing, that is an enormous compliment to you.
You know, I want to get to the 1990s when this field of fighting for athletes, fighting for non-exploitation, be it sexual, be it physical, be it psychological, was pretty lonely. This was not the kind of thing. I remember your Canadian equivalent, Laura Robinson, who's also a great, a native indigenous and great athlete herself. She would do this stuff on all kinds of issues of abuse in hockey, men's hockey in particular, and how lonely that was. Tell us a little bit about that, please. That 1990s years, after you finished being an amazingly successful Olympian, but you've got this background, and tell us a little bit about that, please.
Well, I'll actually tell you a worse story in that. So I started working on this in 2010. I grew up professionally in an organization called the Women's Sports Foundation, and they mentored me. Donna Lopiano, when she was the executive director, she used to give me assignments like when I was pregnant and it was midnight, right? She had, right. But when you've got somebody pushing you like that, right, it really makes you so much better. And I was the vice president of the organization. I was the president of the organization. I was their legal advisor, and I was their senior director of advocacy. So 30 years I was with them. I testified in Congress, and you name it. I wrote books and articles and was on 60 Minutes, and you name it, I did it. Okay, so in 2010, I went in their director of advocacy. And I recognized that sexual abuse is this huge issue. So I start trying to work with Scott Blackman, who was the head of the Olympic Committee, to try to say, this is really bad, and you need to be acting like a youth-serving organization that you are, and here's some basic things that you can put in place. And we were really making some strides. So we probably the main thing I'm most proud of is during those years is I had to go over Scott Blackman's head, and I went to the board and I knew them to say, hey, you Olympic Committee need to prohibit romantic and sexual relationships between coaches and athletes, regardless of age or consent, throughout sport. So you need to have that because a lot of national governing bodies are not instituting this norm. Like, it's so profoundly basic. So I went over Scott Blackman's head, went to the board, mostly via email and phone calls, and we were able to get that through. So in December of 2012, we got this rule passed that the Olympic Committee agreed that they would make sure that all national governing bodies prohibited romantic and sexual relationships with the athletes they coached, regardless of age or consent. Okay, so I'm so proud of this. We are really making moves. And I'm continuing on. We're doing all this stuff. And then in 2014, are you ready? I got a contract renewal. And the contract renewal said that I would agree not to talk about sexual harassment or abuse in any context. Not in cocktail parties, not in social media.
Sorry,
not,
what?
You got it.
So hang on, you're the CEO. So we skipped over, by the way. You craftily didn't answer my question about the 1990s. You leapt forward to the apex of power.
Yeah.
You're at that being, and doing a good job defending the rights of athletes to not be abused, specifically sexually, with people of power. And then to get your contract renewed, you have to never discuss this. What's going on?
They were willing to pay me 10 grand a month not to talk about sexual abuse.
Why?
Well, it's part, the foundation was part of the Olympic movement that required money from the Olympic Committee to buy tickets to go to their dinner. That's how they funded everything that happened at the foundation. And Scott Blackman threatened to take that away if they didn't shut me up. So they listened and they tried. And then, okay, so I'm not going to sign that one.
But hang on, just 1 second. Let the famous quote from Carnegie, who says everyone has a price. Well, we know your price is north of 120,000 US dollars. If they're offering you $10,000 a month not to discuss something, and you're like, guys, this is a no-brainer, I'm not signing that contract.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, it was.
I mean, this is really a step in that omerta, that wall of silence. And I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you, please.
No, I know. I agree. It was omerta. It was at first I thought that there just had to be some mistake. Like, surely you don't understand what advances that we're making here. And there's a big difference between the advocacy department and then the CEO, who was more like, they need to sell sponsorships and tables and, things like that. Right. So there are different departments, and I was head of our advocacy department. And so I just thought, surely people just don't write. So I was writing memos and to have them kind of understand, no, they were dead serious. It took me a while to kind of figure out they were serious. So then they said, okay, if you want your severance, you have to agree to give us everything you've ever worked on and agree never to use it again. So the stuff I had worked on was on their website. You can go right now on their website, and all the policies and the procedures and the everything, all the white papers and the reactions to all these different stories. It was
this
there.
Is the cementing of the wall of silence, isn't it? This is just it to be able to shut somebody up who's as prominent as you with this massive amounts of financial incentives is really a threat. Wow.
Yeah, no, so I didn't take that either. I walked away and I just started Champion Women and kept right on going. I wanted to get change to scale. So as a civil rights lawyer, I could be taking on individual cases and representing individual clients and getting the best that I possibly could for them. But in order to be able to make these systemic changes, you have to be working on a bigger plane than that, right? You've got to be changing the system instead of working within the system and getting blocked in all these different ways. So Champion Women, we take on projects that are designed to get change to scale. We recently did we have a project running that Aaron Griffin, your student, was really involved with, that had to do with looking at every single school in the United States. So NCAA, NAIA, junior colleges, and how were they complying with Title IX? We found that overall, schools were denying women 183,000 opportunities to participate in sports because they're women. Women were losing.
Sorry, let me just jump in with some glossary here. Again, we got worldwide listeners.
Oh yeah,
Title IX is essentially, and I'm shorthanding an
yeah.
incredibly complex and important issue, but it's essentially saying women are equal to men and deserve an equal opportunity, and this is part of the legislation here. So, and when you speak about schools in America, you're speaking about the top universities, Harvard, wherever, University of New Haven, down to high school, whatever. When you're saying that they're denying 100,000 opportunities, what does that mean?
It means that women are entitled to whatever the schools are giving the boys. Okay, so if they're giving the boys this amazing caviar and lobster dinners, if they're giving them that kind of experience, then the women are entitled to that same kind of educational experience, that same kind of sports experience. If women were getting what schools are providing men, they would be getting 183,000 more sports opportunities than what they're currently being provided because they're women. So I thought, as somebody I wrote the book on Title IX, that women's sports are increasing and that the gap was narrowing. No, just the opposite. We found that actually the gap is growing, that the discrimination against women in sports is actually worse. And that, we talked about how that the Olympic Committee is not interested in making sure that that coaches are not abusing their athletes. The NCAA and the NAIA is not interested in making sure that schools are complying with Title IX. So because of that, there is one remedy, and that is 18 to 22-year-olds can sue their school. But most don't sue their school. And you know why? Because that 183,000 women think that they didn't get to play college sports and think that they did not get a college scholarship because they weren't good enough. And that's not true. They didn't get it because they're being intentionally discriminated against. So we've created a database, and Erin was so good about helping us be able to write these letters to all the commissioners around the country to show them, here's how each of your schools are doing and what are you going to do about it. A huge project. We're only at like step 2 of 10, but we're hoping to be able to use some of this athlete activism to be able to get the guys, frankly, to be supportive of women in sports and use some of their platform, use some of their privilege and platform to be able to advocate on behalf of women in sports.
In the midst of this appalling severance, here's hundreds of thousands of dollars, now shut up and go away and don't mention this stuff again. You roll up your sleeves and you start this brand new organization.
But what was hard for me was not the money, although I have 3 kids in private school, so yes, that would have been nice. But what was hard for me, honestly, was like losing a community. So I had been part of the Women's Sports Foundation pretty much longer than anybody else by that time, on a continuous basis, for every board meeting and every dinner and the only dinners that I didn't go to, they have a big award ceremony that honors the top individual and team athlete of the year. The only ones I didn't go to were for the birth of my children. Other than that, I was there. And I knew everybody there, right? It was like my team. This was so to lose that, for me, that was profoundly excruciating. I was like, I'm getting kicked out of a community because I did my job, because I was good at it, because I was making change.
And it wasn't all that long ago. It was 2014.
2014.
It's not like 1992 or 1982 or turn of the century. It was only a few years ago. Look,
I think it's important because then it was just a year later that Larry Nassar comes out, and so so then all of the work that I had been doing, I just thank God 100 times over that A, I didn't sign, and B, that I didn't give everything away, because I had the blueprint of what the United States Center for Safe Sport was supposed to look like. I wrote it. I had all of these documents that forms the foundation of work to be able to move on.
And we're gonna link to those documents because, again, Nancy, many of our listeners are from other countries that have very few countries have moved as far as the United States in terms of addressing these issues, and have most countries in the world do not have something equivalent to safe sport, and they should. This is a basic. It's a DAW moment.
Yeah.
So we're almost out of time here. So let me ask you this final question. And remember that we have people from Nigeria, from Japan, from South Africa, from Australia, from all around the world listening to this, as well as, of course, our American and Canadian listeners. Their parents or their athletes or their sports officials, and they've now listened to this and gone, wow, I had no idea that this. What is the one piece of advice that you would give them in terms of making sure they're protected, or that their children are protected, or that their sport is protected?
What is the one piece of advice that I would give people around the world to, I would make sure that that they invest their energy and time into ensuring that there is a well-established system for removing sexual abusers and physical, emotional abusers as well, but to remove them from sport. Because if you don't have a mechanism to be able to do that, then you're depending on CAS, the Court of Arbitration for Sport, right? Or you're depending on, your local laws. You have to have a mechanism for doing that. FIFA is doing it through, they have a human rights provision embedded within FIFA, within the Soccer International Federation. Yeah. And similarly, like Minky Wharton at Human Rights Watch, doing the same thing, right? Using the human rights model as a way to protect athletes. And what I think is really great is that with Black Lives Matter, with athletes finding their voice, with the NCAA athletes finding their voice and finding their power, is that they are leading the way for these principles of human rights to be embedded throughout society. It will not just affect sports. When we get protections for athletes in sports, you better believe that's going to start applying to artists, to actors, to all other areas where currently there are not protections.
Nancy, I want to thank you for your time, both for your time this morning and also for the extraordinary work that you've done. You were the Play the Game winner, which is a prestigious international sports award last year. You deserved the award, and I just thank you so much for your courage and for this amazing work. I know that there are athletes around the world that would join me in thanking you.
Thank you, Declan. I appreciate it. I don't do it for that, but I know that I always sort of fall back on the powerful experience that sports is, and anything we can do to make it bigger, better, greater, the better. So thank you again for having me on your show and giving me this opportunity to explain the work that we do, because it does take a while.
Hey, this is Declan. Thank you so much for your time and attention to this interview. Many of you will be interested in Nancy's work, and you can get more information on the sites Champion Women and Safe Sports, or if you go to this podcast website, www.crimewavespodcast.com, we'll put the links in there. And please, if you feel moved, do like and follow us on social media or subscribe to the podcast. Very, very much appreciated. We'll be back next week with another tale from one of the most courageous men in international sport, someone who risked everything to ensure that sport was protected from criminality. Please join us then. Take care.